And welcome. And I just want to make sure I get to the share and the text that we're going to be doing. So this is, of course, the second of the three parshiot, the 3 weeks that we spend on Abraham and what happens there and the establishment of the covenant, etc., etc., etc. So in the previous sessions, I'm going to check.
Don't forget the blessing.
Yes, thank you so much. I think I did. So thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And thank you for reminding me. Okay, you're definitely my sergeant at arms, Lauren. Thank you. So I just was mentioning that in the previous times we've met on this parsha, we discussed the visit of the 3 angels to Abraham and how they predict that, prophesy that Abraham and Sarah are going to have a child of their own. And this is the point. And the last thing we read was how God shares with Abraham, and he is Abraham at this point, what he is going to do with the cities, the 5 cities, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Tzoim, and Zoar. And remember, we have that absolutely famous passage where Abraham is bargaining with God to spare the cities if there are a sufficient number of righteous men. The tradition explains that the reason why he comes down to 10, that's the smallest number, he starts with 50, winds up with 10, because if you divide 10 by 5, you get 2 righteous people per city, and going to less than 2 righteous people would be an impossibility. God isn't going to hold it. Abraham is not going to ask more from God than that at least they have each other for support in their righteousness. And then we read about how the angels, of course, wind up, and there are 2 angels. Look at this. Vayavo'u shnei hamalachim, and the 2 angels arrived to Sodom ba'erev, in the evening. Lot yoshev b'shar Sodom, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. That is significant. It isn't so much about him sitting in the gate. It has to do with the fact that he was a judge right there. That's where they made judgments. They had their cases. Vayar Lot, and Lot saw, Vayakom likratam, and he arose to greet them. Vayishtachu apayim arza, and they bowed with their faces to the ground. Okay. A lot of stuff to unpack in this verse. Okay. So one thing I do want to mention, and this may have been mentioned before, because there are 3 angels we remember that visited Abraham, and 2 angels wind up with Lot. What happened to one of the angels? And we learn from this a principle of angel, that the angels have careful rules, and the one angel had come to tell Sarah that she was going to have a child, Abraham and Sarah, and once he had finished his mission, he was off the hook. And these 2 angels, one of them is going to come to destroy the city, and the reason there are 2 angels is because one of them is going to be left to, in fact, save Lot and his family. So this is something about, they have strong unions. Angels have strong unions. So let's take a look at Rashi. Hamalachim, the angels. Ulahalan, and I think he's saying, and before that, Kara'am Anashim, they were referred to as men, not as angels, right? When they appeared to Abraham.
Rabbi, you're doing the second Rashi.
Well, I've got this under Aleph. That's what
I have that under for the second Rashi, when my first one says Shnei, 2 angels.
Yeah, I see it's not here.
Go ahead with yours. If you end up skipping this, we'll add it. We can add it.
Okay, because it could be that, I know where that one is. It's in the previous, so they have it listed. It's the previous Rashi here. Okay, let's find it. All right. Shnei Malachim. Let's see if I can find it.
Interesting.
Yes, it is. Here. Vayavu Shnei Malachim. Right? Uh, yes. Right. He explains here the two angels. Echat lahashchit et Sodom. One to, he mentions under verse
Oh
33.
yeah. It's basically what you just said anyway.
Yes, right. Right. Okay. Well, at least I'm not
Interesting.
giving you bad information, at least on that one. All right.
No?
All right, let me get back into this verse. Right. Okay. So Keshaita Shechina imahem, when the divine presence was with them, Kra'am Anashim, then they are referred to, the angels are referred to as men. Because when they visited Abraham, the Shekhinah was there with them too. Abraham was there in the presence of the Shekhinah, and that's of course the divine presence. And of course, Abraham was bargaining with that divine presence. Davar acher, another interpretation. So what's coming out, what's sort of prompting the comment is that they're mentioned here, they're called malachim, and in a previous chapter, they're called anashim, they're called men. So one is, it's by way of contrast. So davar acher, another interpretation. Eitzel Avraham, when they came to Abraham, or with Abraham, shekocho gadol, whose power, his spiritual power, was so great, v'hayu hamalachim tadirim etzlo, and it was quite common for angels to be with him in that family. It wasn't unusual for angels to be present in Abraham's encampment. Ka'anashim kra'am. So then so let me finish this. I punctuated it badly. Vahayu malachim tadirim etzlo ka'anashim. I needed to finish that phrase, right? I sometimes, the punctuation eludes me, but anyway, just to try and correct that, they were as frequent with him as men, as people. Kra'am anashim. And for that reason, they're called men or people. It's a Lot, however, Lot wasn't such a great character, nor were angels present in his encampment. Kra'am Malachim. That's why they're called Malachim. Ba'erev, in the evening. So again, why mention this detail? Why mention that they arrived in the evening? V'chi kol kach shahu amalachim. And Rashi says, he expresses surprise. He says, well, were they waiting for such a long time? The shahut means to delay, right? And were they so delayed? The angels were so delayed. Mechevron listom. In other words, did it take them such a long time to go from Hebron to Sodom? It's not really that large a journey. It isn't a day's journey. And for angels, right, it shouldn't have taken that long. Ela malachei rachamim hayu. But they were angels of mercy. Umamtimim, and they were delaying themselves. They were waiting. Shema yuchal Avraham lelamed alehem sanegoria. In case Abraham was capable to defend, sanegoria is defense, to teach regarding them, sanegoria, defense. So alehem, of course, sounds like it's referring to the angels, but it could possibly also refer to the people of Sodom. My instinct is to say it's got to refer back to the most recent subject. In other words, possibly not that they needed a defense, but that they themselves, right, could avoid having to bring this to Sodom. So there's something very beautiful about God's kindness, even in the face of wickedness. And we are going to find out just how wicked these people were. And they were wicked.
And Chabad says that Abraham was defending the cities.
Right. So they're saying Alehem, referring to the cities. Okay.
Yeah.
It certainly could be that. It just, the way the sentence flowed, it's tough to understand it that way, but it makes sense. For Lot Yashav Bishar Sodom. So and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Okay, so it says Yashav, but if we look at the pointing, let's take a look, we see that it's Yoshev. right? Even though the way there's no vav here, but that's the tradition. Velot yoshev. So in other words, it's not a past tense, it's not a perfect tense, it's imperfect, right? Is sitting, something like that, right? So he's pointing that out. Rashi's pointing that out to us. And here it says, let's find it here. Yoshev Ketiv. It says Yashav. It's written as Yashav, but we pronounce it as Yoshev. So here's the interpretation. Oto hayom minuhu shofet alehem. It was on that very day that they appointed him, minuhu, they appointed him as a judge over them. Not I don't believe he was doing it by himself, and Rashi tells us this is found in Bereshit Rabbah, this great midrash on the Torah and on the 5 scrolls. Okay, vaYar Lot. So let's find the place here. Here, vaYar Lot. Lot saw from Ra'ah, mi v'gomer, etc. And he rose to greet them. May Beit Avraham Lamad. He learned this from Abraham's house, Lachazor al Haorchim, to actually seek out guests, to make a point, to go to the trouble of seeking guests. Vayomer, and he said, Hinei na Adonai, he said, behold, my lords, Suru na el beit avdechem. Now, this word surah, Rashi is going to explain to us. So it means to turn away. So please turn away to the house of your servant. Velinu, and spend the night. Varachatsu raglechem, and wash your feet. And Rashi's going to comment on that, because spending the night is coming before washing their feet. V'hishkamtem, and get up early. You can rise early. V'halachtem ledarkechem, and go on your way. Vayomru, but they said, lo, no. Ki varchov navlin, we will spend the night in the broad place, in the street. So they were refusing his hospitality, at least as we will see initially. So again, there's, as you sort of look at this carefully, there's stuff that needs to be unpacked here, which we're going to do. Hinena Adonai, behold now, my lords. Hinena, indeed, behold. Atem Adonimli, you are my lords. Achar she'avartem alai, because you are passing before me. In other words, the fact that you're coming in my presence, I consider you my lords. I think there's something actually very beautiful about this thought, right? Davar acher, another interpretation. Hine na, right? Indeed, tzrichim atem, you need to latet lev, to pay attention, al harashaim halalu, with regards to these wicked people, shelo yakiru bachem, that they should not recognize you, vezohi etzah nechona, and this was proper advice. Because the thing that we know specifically about these people, the nature of their wickedness, is they hated foreigners. Think about that, right? They were suspicious and they treated foreigners in a disgusting kind of way. And to think that this is here in the Torah, here written so many centuries ago about human behavior, and how human behavior isn't going to change unless we study these texts and learn from them. So, surna, right? So it means like, let's see how we translated it. Turn away, turn away. Okay, let's see, here we go. Ikmu et haderech, make the way crooked, leveti, to my house. In other words, take a roundabout way to my house. He's going to say it right here. Derech aklaton. This sounds like a possible Greek word, but it means a roundabout, take a roundabout way. Shelo yakiru, so that the people in Sodom do not realize she'atim nichnasim sham, that you're entering there, you're entering my house. Lachach ne'emar suru. And that's why this word suru, turn away, is used here. Again, Bereshit Rabbah. So Bereshit Rabbah is such a careful, meticulous interpretation of biblical text. Velinu, spend the night, v'rachatzu raglechem, and wash your feet. And Rashi says, he's expressing surprise. V'chi darchan shel bnei adam lalun tchila. Is it the practice of people to spend the night first, v'achar kach lichotz, and afterwards to wash their feet? And of course, the washing of the feet was basically refreshing themselves, cleaning themselves from the dust of the way. And we're going to see how Rashi is going to explain why this is reversed here. Ve'od, and not only that. Sha'arei Avraham Amar, if you look at what Abraham said, Amar Lahem, what he said to them, Tchila v'rachatzu raglechem. He said, first of all, wash your feet. Ella, so what's the explanation here? Ella kach amar Lot. This is what, and I believe this is what Lot was thinking. Im kishiyavu anshe Sodom, when the people of Sodom, or the men of Sodom, arrive, vayiru shekvar rachatzu raglehem, and they see that these people have already washed their feet. Ya'alilu alai, they will look for reasons to accuse me. Vayomru, and they're going to say, Kfar avru shnei yamim or shlosha, you mean to tell us that 2 or 3 days have already passed, sheba'u leveitecha, where they arrived in your home, you were treating these strangers so nicely, they were spending 2 or 3 days in your home, velo hadatanu, and you didn't tell us about them? Lefichach, and for this reason, Amar, he thought, Mutav sheyitakvu kan ba'avak raglehem, that they should spend their time here, right? They should delay here with the dust of their feet, sheyu nirim kamo sheba'u achshav, so that they appear as if they just arrived. Lefichach Amar, linu tchila, and for this reason, he said, spend the night first, v'achar kach rachatzu, and afterwards he said, wash your feet. So remember, he asked them, vayomru lo, and they said to him, no. Remember, they said they would spend the night in the street, in the broad place. Ula Avraham amru kain, and with Abraham, they said yes, they accepted his hospitality immediately. It says, kain ta'aseh, thus you should do, by all means, where do what you're proposing. Mikan, and from this we learn, shem misarvin lekatan, that you decline the invitation of a minor person, of someone who is small in status, perhaps also the idea that if somebody might not be able to actually afford to offer hospitality, and you don't want to put someone to that trouble. Ve'ein misarvin lagadol. However, you don't decline someone who is great, and I suspect for the same reason, because they're able to offer the hospitality without, any personal injury, quote.
Quick question.
Yes.
Just curious. So even if they stayed and then washed their feet, based on this explanation, they would still, the other people would still be asking, okay, they washed their feet, so they've already stayed with him, one way or the other. So I don't, or unless it means that they washed their feet after meeting with other people.
I think that's
anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a simple answer. Yes. No, I mean, your point is well taken. And I think the point is that, as you'll see, these people showed up like right away. Okay.
Okay.
So when they showed up right away and they had seen that their feet were washed, Alilah is a pretext. Okay. That's what a Alilah is it looking for a pretext.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, if they wash their feet, they would say, oh, these people have been with you 2 or 3 days. Not that they'd really been with them 2 or 3 days, but it's a way of finding a pretext.
So the assumption is that they would spend the night, meet with the other people, and then wash their feet after that, right?
Yeah,
So they're
correct.
to avoid all the. Oh, okay,
Right.
got it.
Yeah, good. Okay, so let's take a look. Ki varchov nalin. We will spend the night in the broad place. Hare ki meshamesh belashon elai. So he says this word ki has several. It can mean because, but here it means rather. Ella, however. Here it is understood, this word ki, this utility word, she'amru, they said, lo nasur el beitcha, we will not turn aside into your house, or go in a roundabout way to your house, ela barchov shel ir nalin, but we'll spend the night in the broad place of the city, outside, in other words, right, in the street. Vayiftzarbam, and he urged them. Lot urged them, ma'od, very much. He urged them a great deal. Vayasuru elav, and so they turned aside, turned away to him. They did this. Vayavo el beito, and they came to his home. Vayas lahem mishpteh, and he made a feast for them. Umatzot afa, and he baked matzot. Vayochelu, and they ate. They ate these meat matzot, etc. So take a look. Vayasur elav, ikmu et haderech. So in other words, they went in a roundabout way, letzad beito, to the side of his house. In other words, to where his house was. Umatzot afa, that detail that he baked matzahs, Pesach haya. It was Pesach. So, in other words, this we could say that the three strangers, the three angels visited Abraham on Pesach, all right? And also that the announcement of Isaac's birth was on Pesach, and the tradition is that he was born on Rosh Hashanah, so the gestation, the pregnancy, was about 7 months, which I understand is possible. This is mentioned in text quite a bit. Let's keep going. Look at what happens here. And I think it's so interesting, right? Especially in the present time. Terem yishkavu, before they even had a chance to lay down, v'anshe ha'ir, and the men of the city, anshe Sodom, the men of Sodom. Rashi's going to mention, why does it mention this twice, right? Keep going. Nasabu al habayit, they gathered around the house. Minar v'ad zaken, from the youth up until the elderly, from the youth to the elderly. Kol ha'am, the entire people, all the inhabitants. Mikatse means from the edges, but Safaria, I think, gives a very nice interpretation and says without exception, and that is going to be reflected in the Rashi as well. Okay, so we'll do the comment on this. Here we are. Vayasuru elav. Oh, sorry, we had that. Terem yishkavu v'anshe ha'ir anshe Sodom. Before they even had a chance to lie down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom. Kach nidrash beVereshit Rabbah. This is the way this is interpreted in Bereshit Rabbah. Terem yishkavu, before they lay down. V'anshe ha'ir hayu befihem. And it says they were, literally it means the men of the city were in their mouths, shel malachim, of the angels. And again, Safaria, I think, gives a beautiful interpretation. It says they were the topic of conversation. As you'll see, this is going to be done, Rashi's going to support that interpretation, right? That they were discussing the men of the city with Lot. Shayu sho'alim lelot, because they were inquiring of Lot, ma tivam, what is the nature of these people? Uma sehem, what kind of activities are they engaged in? In other words, we were told they were wicked, but what are we talking about? What's their characters? What do they do? Vahu omer lahem, and he says to them, Rovam rishayim, most of them are wicked. Odam medabrim ahem, and they were still discussing them, v'anshe Sodom, and at that point, the men, while they were even discussing, right, the men of Sodom, etc. Upshuto, and the simple explanation, the literal explanation of this is Shel Mikra, of the scriptural verse, for Anshe Ha'ir, that is to say, the men of the city, Anshe Rasha, these wicked people, Nasfu al Habayit, they gathered around the house, for Al Shayu Rushaim, and because they were wicked, Nikraim Anshe Sodom, they were referred to as the men of Sodom, because Sodom had this terrible reputation, and calling them people of Sodom was the same as calling them people of wickedness, wicked people. Kemoshe Amar Hakatuv, as we see later on in the scriptural text, va'anshe Sodom ra'im v'chataim, and the men of Sodom were wicked and sinful. Kol ha'am mikatze, so all the people from the edges, literally is what it means. Miktsei ha'ir ad hakatze, in other words, from one edge of the city to the other edge of the city, right? So, without exception. She'ein echad mehem, this is it, that not even one of them, moche beyadam, resisted, right? No, they all agree this is what they needed to do. And I cannot help thinking about some of the events that are taking place these days. She'afilu tzaddik echad ein bahem, because there wasn't even one righteous person among them. So, very interesting that we are reading this material at this particular moment. Let me find, there it is. And I want to mark the place. We'll continue. Sorry, let me see if I can get this over. There we go. And we will start here tomorrow.
Why did Lot say most of them were wicked if there was not one righteous person?
So that's a good question. Exactly how one might answer that. I guess there are a couple of things. One is that from his perspective, if he had said they're all wicked, what would that have been saying about him? Right? And the fact that they had elected him as a judge, which, by the way, you're going to see an interesting statement in a little bit about that. The other piece, which is a little bit more complimentary, is that even though they may have all been wicked, it wasn't for him to say that. It isn't the right thing for him to say. So those are two thoughts. I don't claim they're compelling, but they are certainly explanations as to why he would not have said they're all wicked.
Yeah, I like them both.
Thank you. Okay.
I was thinking along the lines of the second one, but the first one makes sense
yes.
also.
All right. So with this, I'm going to stop the recording.